Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of What We Do in the Shadows, the grand opening. And I overall enjoyed this episode, though I do think that about two of these kind of storylines that we get a total of three that are kind of going on, could have been fleshed out into their own kind of episodes and kind of delved into a little bit better because of the potential that they were having there. Well, I definitely think that since we got Nadja's grand opening for her club, we got Laszlo and Colin kind of dealing with what their kind of growing dynamic is, and then Nandor and Guillermo dealing with like the Jin and all that kind of stuff. That the Laszlo one definitely could have been upgraded to a full AB kind of scenario of being half of at least an episode. The Nadja one should have been upgraded to a complete episode and just have that take the whole kind of thing and then interweave the other characters throughout what's kind of going on. That I think would have worked a lot better. Not saying that this is the worst kind of episode. Definitely more kind of middle for me. Not completely laughing out loud at all the different kind of stuff, but I definitely enjoyed seeing the character interactions and the crazy insanity that was ensuing. Definitely a lot with the Jin, having him be a kind of unofficial kind of addition to the cast since he's kind of there to deal with like Nandor's wishes and all that. And I like seeing him just talking about the like insanity of the situation and his kind of take on things. Alright, so let's kind of go in order and see how they kind of like shake out, and then we'll pretty much deal with like Laszlo's stuff first, then the whole kind of club thing, and then kind of go and finish up with bringing it back around with Nandor's and Guillermo's as that kind of like all dovetails at the end, because Nadja's stuff kind of bookends a lot of the things going on, being kind of in the beginning, kind of do some stuff in the middle with her stuff, and then kind of ending it out with the club stuff. So we start off and we see that Nadja's getting ready to open her club, pumping people up, even showing that it's named Nadja's, which of course it would be, and that she's telling everybody to kind of wait longer, and that kind of makes sense with vampires, that they would have kind of more of a patience slash tolerance for waiting for that kind of stuff because of immortality, though you do run the risk of people getting completely pissed off and just running up and like killing your ass or like wrecking shit as a vampire, so there's double-edged swords there. She's going through and she's seeing everything kind of being worked out. The guide is pretty much being her kind of second in command, having the race bring in beer and everything, which is interesting because it's like, okay, that must be for the humans that they want to eat or whatnot. Saying that the blood sprinklers are all topped off and everything. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of goes on with the guide, because we saw that like Laszlo unlocking those memories kind of let her go a little bit kind of crazier. So being in a kind of environment that kind of would feed into that kind of crazy and persona that she had in the past could like give us some interesting and kind of funny ass shit going on. But she checks in with Nandor, who's a little bit down because evidently Marwa is pretty much perfect and he can tweak her to even better kind of perfection with the Jin, but he feels that he doesn't really measure up with her and is not as good for her. And then now just like, well, then why don't you like improve yourself? He's like, yes, I will use the Jin to improve myself and stuff. It's like all right, whatever. And we find out that like she's getting this prolific vampire rapper Richie Sucks to open for the club, but then she gets the information that he's not coming. He canceled at the last minute, and she's pissed off and she unleashes her like hellacious scream. And the thing is, this is a problem, because when you're doing an opening for a club like this, you want it to have the best first impression you can. Now, granted, shit happens sometimes, and like things go completely and utterly out of control. So you could have like a shitty opening, and you could bring it back, though it's usually harder because you usually get into that kind of spiral of like, ah shit, nobody's gonna come, and then shit just gets kind of worse. So Nadja and the guide are like, we're gonna deal with this. Yeah. So that's pretty much their main through line as they like detail throughout the episode. So let's go and like deal with this stuff with Laszlo first. We see that Guillermo is like pretty much talking to the documentary crew, pretty much saying that like Colin, as I'm now going to be calling him Colin, because throughout this episode he's pretty much Colin, only in kid form, and that he's grown to be like pretty much a 6 or 7 year old. He outgrows clothes and shoes like between breakfast and lunch, and that he is really into Legos now and has started his own YouTube channel with 2 subscribers. And like, you go, man. And we see that he starts going into really minute details about stuff that he does with the Legos and really kind of over explains things. And that kind of happens with certain kids, but you definitely see him doing it in a kind of more similar kind of style to Colin Robinson, even though we don't see that he is feeding off of energy yet. We don't see his eyes doing what he's doing like he used to do with certain feeding things. Though, granted, he has been able to feed off people just by being an asshole without showing off the eyes and things going on. So, I don't know if this is just who Colin is, or if he's like working out his kind of energy vampire kind of things going on, as we see him doing the stuff for his videos and all that. We then see that Guillermo is pretty much giving this information to Laszlo, and we then learn that he's also in the musical theater, and this really irks Laszlo because he views it as the lowest form of entertainment, and that only stupid people like it. And it's like, just let him like it, man. People like their own shit. And this puts him on a course of trying to like correct this, because he's trying to make him the most interesting adult possible, the most interesting person ever. And Guillermo's just like, if he likes it, he likes it, man. It's alright. And Laszlo's then pretty much goes and pretty much tries to steal art with him. And this one is funny. They definitely at least do funny kind of stuff with it, but I kind of would have liked it to go a little bit further and have kind of more meat on it and more kind of interaction and kind of learn more about Colin and Laszlo's kind of stuff, because there's really good stuff here that we start bringing in on like Laszlo and his father. And we see them break into this art place to steal art. He's like, alright, he'll appreciate this art if he steals it, pretty much. And we're like, alright, we're going to use this powder kind of thing. We're going to see all this. He goes through and does all these kind of maneuvers to avoid the lasers and all that. And Colin is just going into all this stuff about Legos and all that. And he's like, can you please shut the fuck up? And he's like, oh. And Colin's kind of looking down. He's like, listen, I'm sorry. What were you going to say? Goes into it. And he's like, oh, cool. He at least tries to make an attempt. Though, granted, Colin is not helping much when he just essentially verbally vomits stuff that, like, has no, like, bearing or whatnot. It's like, alright. Like, you see him kind of starting up with, like, a certain kind of hook or whatnot, and then just goes on and on and on and on and on. That's not saying that his interests aren't, like, worthwhile or whatnot, but there is a point where it's like, okay, I don't give a fuck. No problem there. I'll just be like, what do you do? And then he accidentally sets up this stuff, so he has to, like, fly him out. And he's like, alright, listen, he's too young for, like, drinking and whoring, so I just put him in this dumpster to see how many rats he can kill. And then he's like, how you doing in there? And he's, like, made friends with the rats, looking at these, like, musical playbills. And he's like, oh, God. And then talks about his relationship with his father, how he sent him to boarding school and all that, and that he really didn't have a good relationship with his father. And then he's like, oh, okay. Well, he starts then, Colin, like, holds his hand and starts talking to him and, like, musical kind of stuff from, like, the musical theater. He's like, alright, that's kind of cool. And they have a nice little kind of bonding moment as he's like, okay, my father didn't really like me very much. Thought, like, his stuff was kind of stupid. It's like that kind of generational thing. It's like, yeah, okay. And Colin's like, talking about, like, how his father saw certain things in him or didn't, and that usually in pretty much this kind of thing, this quote from, like, this musical theater thing to kind of just, like, make him kind of feel better. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's your interest, and that's better. He used his interest to kind of relate to Laszlo as he then starts vomiting the rest of the musical kind of things. And then it kind of dovetails with what goes on with the end of the club. So let's get into Nandor and Guillermo and the Jin stuff. So he's feeling inadequate, so he decides to improve himself. And what does that mean? He is going to wish for the world's biggest dick. Guillermo, rightfully, is like, hold that fucking shit back, bro. Jin's, you need to be specific as motherfucking shit. And Kinder's like, right, he could give me a dick that would crush me or whatnot, and like all that, like all this kind of shit. So they decided to really dig in deep, and this was pretty funny because you're trying to figure out every loophole that the Jin could utilize to fuck you over. Like, you could put the dick on your forehead. He could put the dick at the end of your dick. He could do a lot of things. Give you an animal dick. It's like the biggest dick in the world. Blue whales have gigantic dicks. It would just boom. Hello there. Can't use that shit. And they go through all this kind of stuff. Guillermo rightfully is like, hey, listen, you cannot give him the biggest dick by making everybody else's in the world's dick smaller. And I'm like, that's a good catch, because that would have been a motherfucking horrendous shitbag thing to do on that. And then she's like, these guys. This is kind of, and when they use the documentary crew to kind of look at him, I really liked him as he's like, yeah, this is my job, trying to like fuck you over, to show your desires and your greeds and all that kind of stuff, to learn stuff. But these guys, even though it's annoying, he kind of respects him for it, and he's like, yeah, you got me there. He was gonna do it. And Nandor's like, yeah, every time I use my dick, I'm gonna think of you, man. And it's like, no, don't say that. And then, dude. So then he looks, he sees that his dick is essentially just like 20% bigger. Even the Jin's like, alright. And Marwa had pretty much come down to pretty much say like, hey, Rick, they're gonna have him at the club. Richie Sucks is gonna be there. And she kind of like goes away. We also see that Nadja and the guide get there, and that the familiar is pretty much using him for his musical stuff and everything. We see the dynamic is that he's really controlling Richie Sucks, and it's just really an asshole. And Nadja and the guy are like, alright, because she was going to go in, it's going to be good cop, bad cop. I was like, we're cops. It's funny, the guy's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about with this shit. And they get in there, they see that he's stopping him from drinking blood, that he wasn't going to do it, but now it's like, alright, I'll do it with my jazz thing and everything, and just pretty much latching on to this dude musically to ride off his coattails and do this stuff. And we then get back to the club. We see that he's pretty much set up this jazz thing. The vampires are like, what the fuck's going on? This is stupid. And then we see that Richie Sucks is trying to come in, launch shift this stuff, and Nadja pretty much like hyped him up and like, listen, be you, man. Do your shit. And tells his familiar to get fucked, tosses him out. He was like, yeah, I was going to do this, but you know what? I'm going to try out my new material of observational comedy. And the vampires are like, this fucking sucks. They like throw him off the stage. Everything's about to go to shit. And we see that everybody pretty much came in there, which we find out that the downside to Nandor's wish is that now every time he uses his penis, he thinks of Guillermo. And he couldn't do it with Marwa. And I'm just like, shit. Yep. That was a good one. That was a good one. And Laszlo and Colin were there, so Colin just pretty much gets up, takes these beer bottle caps, and puts them on his shoes and does a tap dance thing. And we start seeing that the vampires are like, oh, this is pretty cool. And it kind of works because not just like saying, hey, children acts. They're kind of freaky, kind of like childhood innocence and stuff like that vampires remember and all that. It's like, yeah, it kind of worked out well enough. And it's like, interesting. And he did it pretty well. It's still kind of freaky to see Colin's head. They do a good job of Colin's head on whatever body they are utilizing at that point. It was kind of freaky here to see it more in motion, but it never really broke what's going on, if that makes sense. Another kind of cool thing was to showcase the different kind of transport styles that we see with vampires, with Laszlo being more the bat, and of course him doing bat, and Nadja doing the bat, but the guide doing more of a smoke kind of thing. So it's kind of cool to see the different kind of like super kind of motion, like super transport motions that vampires can do, and that you've got different kind of things that they can do. I mean, Jenna turned into a weird kind of crazy ass bat, and Gale went kind of wolf bat thing. So yeah, we've kind of seen that kind of stuff, but it's been more centralized to that, whereas the guide goes kind of Dementor, disapparating kind of thing, kind of similar to like a Harry Potter kind of thing that we've seen in the movies at least. So it is kind of cool to kind of see that kind of stuff. So we'll have to see what kind of weird shit is going to be going on and what kind of next round is going to be going with Colin. Now, normally, I would like to see this kind of take a little bit longer, but you usually only have 10 episodes for this show, and I do think an accelerated aging process works in this show's favor for this kind of thing, because you can do one thing in one episode and do the next stage in the next episode and do faster, weirder kind of shit with it. So I'm like, yes, let's. So we've had baby, we've had toddler, we've had pretty much kid. We'll maybe get tweens, teens kind of Colin, and then maybe kind of like young adult Colin before he probably settles into the age range that we've had, kind of similar to kind of what we've gotten with Groot, except on a more accelerated kind of time frame. But yeah, I overall thought that this was a pretty acceptable episode. Nothing like horrendously bad happened or I didn't think worked or anything was like amazing along the levels of certain other episodes that we've seen before, but just a good episode of What We Do in the Shadows. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.